Welcome everyone. My name is Rajib Dey and I'm from the Uber's production engineering group. Me, along with my team, we are responsible for reliability and overall incident management of some of the most mission critical cartographic systems at Uber. I'm excited here to talk about our incident management process, end to end, all the key milestone, key personas involved in there, and how it improves or impacts our tech platform's reliability overall. The entire talk is divided into three portions. Before I delve into the actual processes, which is the primary focus of this talk, I will talk a little bit about incident definition and lifecycle, where I will try to explain what exactly incident means for Uber and how we process incident from end to end. Things like from reporting and outreach to mitigation, and how we ensure that we learn everything from individual incident so that it does not repeat again, and we can assimilate all the lessons learned from the incident throughout our product and processes. At the end, I'll share a few thoughts or few key lessons that we have learned, which we believe will be of use for the audience as well. Okay, so let's start with what we call incident at Uber. Incident generally at Uber represent either a partial or complete unavailability of Uber services to our customers. Think of a small features in the product which may not be working as expected in terms of performance or in terms of its efficacy. That would be considered as our an incident, and that is one of the like most smallest or least impactful incident. From there to an absolute outage where you cannot load the Uber app, order any food through our Uber Eats app, or not able to take any any ride sharing services. That will be a complete outage or incident at Uber. Every incident at Uber is denoted by two properties: scope and level. The level property can be either 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and indicates the severity of the incident. For example, a level 5 incident will be an complete outage of a service or of our core functionality, while level 1 means business as usual. Level 4 means it is external but not core functionality. And level 3 means it is an incident but it is not impacting our external user. It's only limited to internal. While level 2 means either something like planned incident or something that have the potential to deteriorate but not yet. Other than the level, which signifies the severity, the second property that is always used to always associated with every incident is the scope, which represent the geographical spread of the incident. It can be either low, medium, or high. A low scope, low incident will be an incident that is impacting only a single city or maybe a smaller region. A medium scoped incidents are incidents that have multiple cities to a region or a country impacting, while a high scope incident is something that is impacting multiple region or entire globe. We operate around 800 cities as of the time of this talk, and all of these things come into play to represent an impact of individual incident and in our incident management processes. So it is when every engineers or any leadership executives are looking at our incidents, they would always know that what this exact incident is and how deeply impactful it is from just by these two properties. Uh, every thing that I'm sharing here in the incidents are primarily lessons or observations that are taken from um, tech platform induced incidents. It is important to understand that our service interruptions can happen by things that are technical issues that are originating from our tech platform, things like code deployment or configuration changes, or some kind of service, other kind of service outages. But it can also happen due to completely something beyond our control. Things like natural calamities, things like say curfew and legal or judicial reasons. For example, sometime during votes or during some other kind of reasons, individual cities or towns or counties can lock down their geographical area, and that will also, and as part of that, Uber services also will be locked down and will not be available in those areas, and that will also be considered as an incident at Uber. So those incidents will, the at least the information that I'm sharing here are not so relevant for those incidents that are not caused by our tech platform. Okay, now that I have talked a little bit about the incidents, let me go through that how we manage incident overall, or what is the life cycle of an individual incident. Incidents are generally detected, or most of the time detected by our alerting systems, or by our monitoring system. So one or several on-call team or engineers will be alerted when something goes bad. This is not always the case. Sometimes we get to know things that are very minute and very intricate and reported by the user instead, or by our partners. But most of the time it will be caught by our monitoring system. But once it is caught, these incidents are reported or captured in a centralized management system. We call it incident manager. From there, we start doing the root cause and basically mitigation and resolution of the incident on the same system, and where we capture the incident. From there, once the incident is immediately mitigated, the incidents generally move on to its next phase of life cycle, which is basically finding out the root cause analysis, what was the exact impact, and finding out what all we can do to prevent it from happening again. Once those things are done, that generally results in few artifacts, things like postmortem documents, few actionable work items, maybe code change or configuration change, or maybe improvement of certain other technical component. With all of those lessons captured, the incidents then generally go through a review and curation process to basically make sure that all the things that we have captured are accurate, and all the action items that we have taken have indeed been worked upon and assimilated into our overall project management system, where we do our both strategic as well as tactical planning work. And last but not least, once all of those things happen, these things are basically funneled to individual product, platform, and process improvements. And those, again, results in changes or improvements on those things. And then the cycle continues. It is important to call out that why the process improvements then again connected back to the incident management process is most of our outages, our incidents, almost 70% of them are due to code or configuration change. So as we improve upon those, even for making the system better and better in terms of reliability, those changes in itself comes with a higher risk of causing even further incidents. So there is always has to be a trend of making it better than before. Uh, that is, I think, that should give you some understanding about what causes, what is considered as an incident, and how incidents are go through at Uber at their different phases. With that being said, we'll delve into the details of key processes in incident management at Uber, um, where I'll be going through individual processes and detailing them. When I say detailing them, I'll be basically talking about the softwares that we use, what kind of key elements in those things, and what personas are used, and how those individual processes are interconnected, and where they stand in the overall process. Before we'll delve into individual of those processes, I will talk about a couple of meta things around, because there will be quite a few processes involved. I will provide some kind of grouping so that users can understand their grouping, how they're logically connected. And I'll also talk about standard operating procedures, which are kind of meta work that we do to maintain some level of uniform governance across the board. All right. So before I talk about individual incidents, I want to call out a few key elements. As I said, standard operating procedures are one of those meta things that are kind of elemental attribute for all incident management practices and processes. What are these? Are basically these are living documents. These are always being worked upon, improved upon, and constantly they are always assimilating feedback. And what they do is that they provide an authoritative source of information around how certain things is done and why these things are done. The standard operating procedures are basically guidelines, and they span across the board, not only from absolutely all the different phases of an incident management process, things like being on call, how do we do incident response, what are the methods of escalations, how we deduce an impact of an incident, to even preparatory work. For example, not everything at Uber in terms of technical assets are not equally important in terms of reliability. What it means is that there are certain systems that are more business critical, and if they had some kind of interruptions, will cause much significant more impactful incidents compared to some other services. And the way we capture or codify this is by tiering, that there are services that are of tier 1 and tier 0, which are absolutely critical. And then there are also services that there are tier 3, tier 4, which are not so much critical and provide ancillary functions or good to have kind of functions. The tiering process itself is governed by a standard operating procedure, that what constitutes a tier 1 process. So there are meta documents, and I think this is probably the reason I put it as a kept it as a separate slide, is that these provide the foundation for all other processes, and this provide the in theoretical work to explain why these things are like this, and how they are they are interrelated, like the feedback between different processes. And the standard operating procedures, as I called out, they span across incident response, service steering, and being on call, and more. These documents are almost always available from our production engineering standard documentation library, and these are heavily linked from all our softwares. So for example, if you are being on call and there is a particular software we use to facilitate our on call duties, all those tools are always have links for our standard operating procedures. So if there's someone who is trying to learn, or something is not clear, you can always access these standard operating procedure, or SOPs as we call them, from a very easily accessible location. And that gives us an opportunity to make sure that the entire organization, are consistent with the terms and the definitions. The I will be talking about almost 7 or 9 distinct incident management process. Because they are quite a handful, I thought it will be good to group them into categories that are relevant to incident management. By and large, all this work are all these processes are grouped into 3 large categories. The first one being document library and training. This is basically all the standard operating procedure that I just mentioned, plus all the onboarding and training material, things like our company-wide training system, we call it education, things like new member onboarding that individual team performs. All of those things, we feel that those are one of the most important part. The best way to prevent incident is by training and by proactive means. And a streamlined training procedure is our best bet to reduce the toil or reduce the resources required to manage incidents later on. This is why we invest heavily, almost 1/3 of our effort, on outreach and training material, that incident management. And that there are dedicated set of processes. That means when a person joins the team, how they do on call shadow, and going through their notification setting for alerts, and all of those things are part of this body of work. So those processes are 1/3 of our overall processes. The second big category of processes are basically when you are on call, what is expected. This involve access management, to making sure that the persons going on call have access to all the mitigation tools, and at the same time that that person is completely aware of all the relevant all at least the relevant incident management practices for his or her job. Yeah. This also means that if some incident happen, that how the response will be and what are the path of escalations, all of those. So being on call and all on call incident response related processes are clubbed into one this bucket. And then the last bucket of processes, or last group of processes, are all around after an incident is mitigated. This include things like postmortem, where we do root cause finding, impact analysis, things like that, but also a review at different level, and then finally how we extract lessons learned from those incidents and how we feed it back to our planning and basically strategic execution pipeline. So these are the big three buckets of processes that I'll be talking about today. We'll start off with the being on call process. This is probably the most important part. There are quite a few things we this process covers. It covers as basic and as elementary things like when an engineering is onboarded, and as I said, most of the time incidents are discovered via alert. It is very important for for quick remediation of those those incident, is that the on-call persons get a notification early on and not with a lot of delay, because that overall dictates what is our turnaround time. So during the on-call, before even a person goes on call, the on-call onboarding process itself makes sure that the peer-reviewed notification rules for the person who is going to on-call. What it means is that if I am a tier 1 service on call, before I go to on call, this there are processes that ensures that my notifications rules for alert, which is basically we use pager duty to dispatch alerts, that my the hierarchy of notification, things like when I'll get push notifications when something goes wrong, and say after 1 minute, if I do not respond to push notification, I should get a call or SMS within 2 minutes, right? But this overall time, that within 3 or 4 minutes I should be, I should be reachable, I should respond back, and that is very much dictated by this notifications rules. And it is important that whoever goes on call for those tier 1 services has very similar, that means all of them have gets a phone call once at the end, you know before it is 5 minutes, more than 5 minutes. So these notifications rules are checked. Then there are other tangential things, things like for every systems that we go on call, it is very important to understand what normal things means, what is normalcy, because interruptions are basically deviations from normalcy. There are noise that are part of regular signal, and we should be able to, or the on-call person should be able to distinguish from what is noise versus what is actually interruptions. On the right, I have given an example screenshot of a graph where there was an outage, and you can see there was an outage first. We did some traffic shifting, and then there was again a repeat oscillation of the outage. So being able to detect this and having alert on this, that means not only an understanding about what is the normal in terms of key performance. In this case, this is a CPU utilization graph, and you can see generally this service at peaks goes for around 1.5 to 2 CPU, right? uh, so that kind of understanding is important, and the alerts for that particular service should reflect these, right? They should not be either too relaxed, where it will be a longer time before we detect the incidents, or it is too restrictive and you can get false positive. Other than all these what contextual understanding, the person who is also expected to understand a little bit of incident management, particularly if they are on the critical services. That means if something happens, they don't have to think a lot about what kind of incident it is and how I should file it, and how I should escalate if need be. These are all covered under the being on call process. uh, uh, One of the other key process in being on call is the on call handoff. And this is another very effective practice we found, that happens between two on call shift, two successive on call shift, and the previous on call person will be giving a briefing uh, to the person who is present on call, or coming on call person. This will cover things like anything that is notable, basically all the context, generally also on-call runbook annotations, like if the runbook is accurate and if anything needs to be updated, those kind of things. If there any alert tuning is happening, all of those things happen during the on-call handoff. Not necessarily always, but during the hand-call, could be the person could be doing it at any time during the on-call period or on-call shift. But generally, during on-call handoff, all those things will be discussed. So it is a review at the most bottom level, and it also always ensures there is a common understanding in across the team. If there are any follow-up action items, those things are also captured. We use a tool, internally built tool called OnCall Handoff Dashboard, or OnCall Dashboard, to do all of to basically facilitate all of these actions, or to execute this process. This tool provides us with all the summary information, things like signal to noise ratio, things like annotation, and all of those. And you can see in the screenshot that we can see that how was the on-call shift, how many alerts, and you can see from Tuesday around 11 o'clock there was an elevated alerts, and the on-call person can actually annotate that this was why it was happened, and also tag it like, okay, it was it was correct or it was not, if it was correct but due to some other reason, and all of those things. um, Other than on call, one of the other than standard business as usual on call practices, when things go wrong, the on call folks has to file it for incident, and during that time they execute the incident response process. Incident response process is probably the most well well documented and well organized process at Uber, um, in the under the umbrella of incident management. Here, something to remember is that in at Uber, every engineer goes to on call, and particularly for their service. And that means that every platform owner, because we have a lot of internal platform like storage, like networking, they also go on call for their own meta or business services, or platform services. We have both service and platform owners. Other than that, we also have a centralized incident management and incident response teams called Ring Zero. It is a volunteered organizations or group where all engineers and managers and everybody from all the tech organization volunteer their time. And this is basically the most highest level with on-call responsibility, including some of the power tools privileges. That means this set of folks can do things like data center failover, or can do some emergency mitigation purpose. Think of them, they are like FEMA central command for us. um, and all of these folks, both service platform on call as well as Ring Zero, are responsible for incident response. Ring Zero and production engineering team, from where I belong to, are in particular responsible for also drafting and maintaining these processes and the efficacy of these processes. Uh, the incident response process involve everything, including defining, denoting, and triaging those incidents, to making sure that those are effectively mitigated, including the outreach part of it. That means we use again the centralized incident management tool for this. So this tool is accessible across the board. So something to remember, not only engineers but also non-engineers folks, like our city operations folks, because as I mentioned that at Uber, incident can happen by natural means also. So they also have access to it. It means it is very possible that some city operations folks are creating an incident, either because natural reasons, or maybe it is some tech platform related issue which has not been tried. So this is company wide available system where folks, all of us, can go create an incident, and that will go through process, and it will automatically notify the relevant people. There are also complementary chat channel and Zoom meetings link for on demand to triage and facilitate coordinations. Something to I want to spend time on, or call out specifically, that most of these incidents are kind of, for us, when we talk about L4 and L5 incidents that are external facing, are kind of very important. We don't take any of those incidents lightly. uh, but even within them, there are certain incidents I would call major incidents. It doesn't mean that we treat the other incidents any of less importance. It just means that major incidents have certain characteristics, and they involve certain more things particular, and I will call out what are those details that requires a little bit of more information. uh, First of all, when I say major incident, it means almost always these are high in scope and L5 level. So L5 high, that means it is an external facing and brand critical feature that is not working across the globe or multiple continent. For example, this is a screenshot of our external monitoring system showing all the things, all the cities that are not able to take Uber rides or Uber Eats for a short period of time. So these are the major incidents, but more these are L5 high incident. But more importantly, these are the incidents characteristically that has been mitigated pretty quickly. Generally, we are able to mitigate incident within in less than a minute to a few minutes, but the complete resolution is still longer. That means there are few hours before we actually solve the problem. So these things generally happen when some really big service interruptions have happened. Maybe things like a network link between data center is broken or something like that. So we have few hours when we are in vulnerable state before we go back to business as usual. So those incidents are we'll call major incidents. In terms of execution or process differences, that because they are higher impact and they involve multiple groups, there will be a full-blown incident response team. What I mean by full blown is that it is a FEMA style execution. That means we have incident commander, we have a scribe, we have a signals operation officer, and we have operations officer. That means the responsibility for executing mitigation technique versus communicating versus strategizing and executing the OODA loop are divided into different personas to reduce the cognitive load for each of them. And also because they are for longer durations, the major incidents response process also has built-in rotations. That means after 4 hours or 2 hours, the incident commanders will be rotated. So all of those things are kicking only for major incidents. For other incidents, even if they're severe, but if it is generally we have less than a few minutes of resolution time, in that case, generally all of those personas are not involved. Uh, Other than incident responses, both normal and the major ones, we have the postmortem process. It is very much similar to most other organizations. The only difference is for us, it is a little bit complicated to get to the get to the actual customer facing impact. The postmortem process covers three key aspects of every incident. This includes what was the impact of this incident, right? It can be either financial or developer experience type of metric that we track. We also try to find out what was the root cause and timeline. Something to remember: at any given point of time, not all the incidents have their root cause identified. Sometimes it takes time, and during the capture of time, it might be still in the unknown phase. And then finally, all the follow-up action items that we want to do to basically make sure this incident does not happen again. So these three basic things we try to capture as part of the postmortem process. Something to again I want to emphasize is that this postmortem process, none of these processes are manual. So these are kind of expert system style execution where there is an expert, but the capturing process or there is a tool that facilitates that. The tools, incident managers, the screenshot that I shared in the previous slides, are the same tool where we do inline postmortem. So the tool has all of those fields and all of those integration with our rest of the system. So all our data around incident are in the same one place. Once incidents are root caused or postmortem is done, generally after a week to a month of period, incidents go through their review cycles. At the most at the least, they are reviewed at a group level or at individual team level. And this is not just the incident review they do. We call it a reliability review, where we not only look at incident management data, things like how many incidents happened, do we have completed all the action items required, what is the state of previous action items from the incidents, but we also look at things like SLA and general reliability metrics, like on-call metrics, like how many alerts are happening, right? For example, as a common check will be that if you have an incident, a team has an incident, we would expect alerts to be fired. If not, that means there are gaps in the alerting and we have to improve. And vice versa. That means if you have a lot of alerts and if there is still not any incidents, we should probably think through that if it is really an alert we want, if it is not signifying any deterioration. Other than local review, there are also global company-wide review happens. This is basically done with all the senior executive on the engineering leadership, and what we do here, basically, we try to find out overall patterns. If there are any hotspots around across the company, thing like specific type of failure that we are looking. These are very contextual, depending upon what kind of business objectives we are executing, what kind of changes we are coming in, whether it is platform or product specific. um, Plus also all the social economic things that happen. That means if we have some events happening and there was a surge of traffic, we might have some capacity hotspots and things like that. So other than global hotspot, we also take you handpick a few selected incidents that we'd like to talk in a broader audience, particularly those which are systemic. That means we are spending some time, but we have not quite got a hold of those the root cause, and it is keep on coming, or things that require collaboration across different organizations, which are much harder to do at a team level, to bring them up, to surface them, things like that. So this is the global review process. So those are key 7 processes, things like on call, things like incident response, things like onboarding, things like incident postmortem, and then finally multiple layers of review. Those are the key processes that happens. And these all of these things have improved the incident management posture at Uber greatly. But without even with that thing, I want to call out a few key lessons that I think that has helped us more than the other ones, and I want to take a few minutes to go through those. The first one was that being all of those things, all the data into one place, and designing it in a way that all of this data then can be again surfaced as analytics, has been tremendously helpful. That means we see, we can, it is very easy for everyone to see the signal to noise ratio at every on-call team. That means, are they getting alert fatigue? How accurate are their alerts? Those alerts have a run book, or the person knows what to do with it? Those kind of analytics helps us triage. That means this helps us building the platform with the right set of features and things like that. The analytics on top of incidents allows us where are the biggest gaps. I things like global review already captures this, but this is as the review perspectives are almost always a snapshot in a time, while the analytics shows long term trend, and then this can be then fed into our strategic planning process. So this is, we are by and large a very data driven company. We use metrics to basically almost trash every aspects of our decision making. So these are concrete things that we can feed into our planning process. Think of this as they are the starting point of all the user stories for our platform reliability features. So all the analytics on top of incident management and on call has been tremendously impactful for us. The second thing that has been extremely useful for us is the restorative justice process. um, Restorative justice process is a practice that has been used in a lot of things related to resiliency engineering, as well as things like prison reform, or things like anywhere where we have emergency health workers, and we think we want to build a culture of sustainability. We want to build a process around it, that considers the people, the product, as well as the processes, all the 3 Ps. Restorative justice is a very effective philosophy in those. In our practice, at least in web operations, we see some elements of it via blameless postmortems, where we evangelize that when we postmortem, it is very important to find out what is the root cause in terms of process, and not to venture into individual people. And it should not be blameful. It should not be a negative experience for any individual persons. But I think it is that is just one aspect of that overall philosophy. But the philosophy itself has a much wider consequences once can it can be adopted. Things like, throughout all our tools that we say, um, the user experience can reflect this philosophy. Uh, that means all our incident management tool, not only those are geared towards that you can only talk about the processes and what and what can be improved upon, and what process did not work or what system did not work. But also when you do the review processes, when like in an incident review, it should not be like that those folks who have written postmortems are feeling hesitant because they feel like they will be vindicated. That is not what we want, and that is of utmost importance. The reason why we utmost importance, if you see on the chart on the right hand side, in 2018 we had more than two-thirds of our incidents that were not annotated. It was overwhelming, the tools were not there, but also there was cultural shift that was required for people to encourage and make comfortable with. And by 2019 end, we had more than two-thirds of the incidents very well annotated, and overall cognitive load as well as business impact was very much improved as this. So we think that restorative justice process should be a central theme, a way to involve people who are involved in the incidents and use them as the source of truth to learn, and putting empathy all around those process and products are central. Those are all the things that I wanted to talk about. I'm sure most of you are already have learned a lot. I am learning a lot throughout this expo. I as a further learning resource, I have shared a few links. FEMA, Federal Agency of Emergency Management, are probably one of the best source of all sorts of incident management standard operating process and guidelines. But other than that, I have also added a few um, emerging fields, things like the resiliency, restorative justice, and anti-fragility, that I think if you can always incorporate and learn more. Thank you for your time. I will take any questions you have.